Hello, I'm Jay Nicoll from Nicoll Investigations, and I'm here to tell you about the next episode of Ontario Cold Cases, a podcast, coming this Sunday, May 19th, on the disappearance of David McDermott. David McDermott, 30 years old, was last seen at his residence on Mill Street, Kitchener, in the late evening of Saturday, November 9th, 2002. David McDermott was to play in an organized ball hockey game the following Sunday morning, but never showed up. Mr. McDermott is described as 6 feet 1 inches tall, 186 pounds, with brown hair and brown eyes, and a tattoo of a small ladybug between his shoulder blades. He's known to have frequented bars in Kitchener and Waterloo. Waterloo Regional Police are looking into possible links between convicted serial killer Bruce McArthur. Local investigators are quick to say they have not established a known link, but they have need to rule out any potential connection to McArthur, a 66-year-old landscaper convicted of killing a number of gay men in the Toronto area. Thank you. Please consider subscribing to Ontario Cold Cases, the podcast, on Patreon, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, or Amazon Music. Hello, I'm Jay Nicoll from Nicoll Investigations, and I'm here to tell you about some of the upcoming episodes of Ontario Cold Cases, a podcast, on the murder of Morag Davies. Morag was born in Scotland and emigrated to Canada in the 1970s, opting to settle in the city of Sarnia, Ontario. She spent the bulk of her professional career in nursing, then transitioned to establish herself as a real estate agent in the 1980s. In August of 1988, Miss Davies, then 45, moved to a bungalow on Roughlaw Drive. She'd been recently divorced and was looking forward to a fresh start, both personally and professionally. On August 23, 1988, a colleague of Miss Davies came over to her new home for a brief visit, sometime between the hours of 10:30 p.m. to 11 p.m. Aside from her killer, Morag's co-worker may have been the last person to see her alive. Sometime that evening or the next day, something nefarious occurred inside the home on Roughlaw Drive. After Morag failed to show up at work for 2 consecutive days, her colleagues became concerned. On August 25, 1988, at 12:00 p.m., 2 of Morag's co-workers decided to check on her. When their repeated knocks went unanswered, their suspicions heightened. They entered the home, and they found Morag dead in her bedroom. She'd been stabbed multiple times. There were no signs of forced entry. The murder weapon and number of times Morag was stabbed had never been divulged by police. His holdback information only the killer would be privy to. Before the killer left Morag's home that fateful night, they left valuable evidence behind at the crime scene, their DNA. So please consider subscribing to Ontario Cold Cases, the podcast, on Patreon, Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcasts. Hello, I'm Jay Nicoll from Nicoll Investigations. I'm here to tell you about some of the upcoming episodes of Ontario Cold Cases, a podcast, on the murder of Pauline Ivy Dudley. On Monday, August 10th, 1973, the victim, Pauline Ivy Dudley, 17 years of age, was dropped off at her parents' residence on Lakeshore Road in the town of Oakville. Investigations revealed that she spent some time with her mother and left the residence at approximately 10:00 p.m. Pauline had indicated that she was going to return to her residence located on the third line, Railroad Number 1 in the town of Milton, where she lived with her boyfriend. Pauline was not seen again. On August 28, 1973, the clothed body of Pauline Dudley was located by a local farmer working his fields at the corner of Lower Baseline and Highway 25 in the town of Oakville. So please consider subscribing to Ontario Cold Cases, the podcast, on Patreon, Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcasts. Hello, I'm Jay Nicoll from Nicoll Investigations, and I'm here to tell you about some of the upcoming episodes of Ontario Cold Cases, a podcast. On the murder of Raymond Michael Veneris. At 9:50 a.m. on Wednesday, February 21st, 2007, police were called to Dublin Line south of No. 5 Side Road in the town of Milton. Raymond Michael Veneris was found shot to death, lying on the ground outside his motor vehicle, which had been left idling. Raymond Veneris was a longtime Milton resident who over the past several years operated several local businesses. Please consider subscribing to Ontario Cold Cases, the podcast, on Patreon, Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcasts. Hello, I'm Jay Nicoll, Nicoll Investigations, and the host of Ontario Cold Cases, the podcast, Missing Persons Edition on Gloria Abadasawe. On February 14th, 1992, Gloria Abadasawe was last seen by a family member on Shooter Street in Toronto. Gloria also went by the name Martha and was born in 1963 and was 28 years old at the time of her disappearance. She has long brown hair, brown eyes, and was 5 feet 2 inches tall and 130 pounds. The medium build and dark complexion. If you have any information on this case, please contact any of the following: Toronto Police Service Missing Persons Unit at 416-808-7411 or Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-TIPS. Thank you, and please consider subscribing to Ontario Cold Cases, a podcast on Patreon, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, or Amazon Music.